Mobile games are a genre I'm not particularly keen on due to the generally simplistic nature of the platform, though to their credit there do exist apps that went above and beyond at providing me with hours of entertainment, and Fire Emblem Heroes happens to be one of my favourites. There is so much to this game that continually draws me to it, and I find there to be nothing more satisfying than building an army consisting of my favourite faces in the franchise. Despite lacking a few key members, it's been over a year. What the actual fuck? One aspect of this game I find to be fascinating is that, as you'd expect, certain units are more effective than others both in a general and situational sense. However, I have noticed that the overall performance of specific characters varies greatly in relation to their source material. Some units have changed ever so slightly for better or worse, a decent amount stayed the same, various foes have become playable for the first time, a couple of "oh no!" and then there are the combatants that evolved into infinitely superior beings. And while it's true there are also units which regress into vastly inferior fighters, I'll get to them soon enough, I observed that 10 warriors in particular received the biggest boost upon being called to the summoning stone. So join me everyone, as it's time for these once catastrophic characters to unleash their full power, as I count down the top 10 units that are better in Fire Emblem Heroes. I just want to clarify that though this list is purely my opinion and you can disagree with it just fine, I have decided to be far more objective in regards to discerning and comparing each unit's performance from their respective games and how they contrast against the current counterparts. On that note, the ranking system for this list is based on how significant of an increase I felt the unit received upon their transition into heroes. So even though Hector and Ryoma are better now, they were good to begin with, so personally it's not that big of an issue. And please bear in mind, this list is not about the best units in the game, just the ones that I feel have really hit the big time considering they pretty much started from nothing. Also, just to point out, I'll be looking at the vanilla forms only and their base skills. No hero variants, inherited skills or anything like that. And I'm also not going to be doing anyone from the recent Epi 7 banner, because at the time of this recording, I feel it's a bit too recent to copiously judge them. And with all that cleared up, I believe it's within my best interest to commend those who are able to get off the bench and into the front lines. Just goes to show what can happen if you do your best. Lyn. Well, would you look at that? Lyn makes an appearance in a Fire Emblem video, not surprising given her significance to the series, all the variants she's received, and being the only alive rep in Fire Emblem Warriors, her overwhelming popularity has allowed Lyn to be featured in just about everything these days. But apparently not enough to be playable in Smash. Being serious here, while I wouldn't call Lyn the best sword unit in Heroes, her rise to power is nothing to scoff at, and has remained a consistently strong hero from the very start, something that cannot be said for every unit in the game. What happened to you, dude? Lyn may be one of the most famous Fire Emblem lords to date, but in regards to battle properties, objectively, she's actually one of the worst, and not a good unit in general. Granted, she does have her positives, like excellent speed and skill in terms of her stats and growth along with luck, a decent personal weapon, and if the player chooses Lyn mode, she'll get a tremendous head start and have the highest availability of the three lords. But if they don't, which is very likely to happen, then Lyn ends up with the worst availability and joins with her strength and defense being utter piss. Not to mention sword locks into a promotion in a game containing many lance enemies, with the unfortunate circumstance of being outclassed by so many other sword units is not even funny. And this includes Eliwood, as he gets a mount and lances upon promotion, whereas Lyn only gains bows, which, may I remind the audience in FE7, suck ass! Statistically speaking, Lyn is a bad unit, and though not the worst in the game, she's very far down the tier list, and yet somehow she continually manages to be the best unit on my team, though after the Binding Blade Let's Play, bad units performing well is no surprise to me at this point. Mercifully, the mountain of praise Lyn garners is relatively justified thanks in part to heroes. Right off the bat, Lyn has rather well-rounded stats, with speed being her best attribute, making it so that unless you have blue units like Reinhardt and Cordelia, killing her is easier said than done, especially as she can retaliate with her Soul Cutty, which is an excellent weapon, boasting high attack combined with the skills Desperation and Brash Assault, not to mention being able to learn both Astra and Gale Force, granting Lyn a substantial amount of versatility, and I'd say she can be rather deadly when engaged in battle. Which is fairly ironic because Lyn actually has a pretty miserable attack stat of only 28, so on average she'll need either an attack boost or utilize specials in order to deal some real damage, and this also plays into what I consider both a strength and weakness, the fact that her personal weapon and skills rely heavily on her HP threshold, and the last time I checked, Lyn wasn't exactly a tank. This can result in a combatant that I'd argue involves a considerable amount of risk to get the most out of, but I do have to give Lyn credit for finally earning the right to all the love she's received over 15 years, though with how many variants she's getting, the devs might want to reel it back. That line for newcomers is getting really long, and Lyn is only making it worse.
Coming through!
Bitch!
Nephany. If it isn't my all-time favourite halberdier, and by extension many other players too, as she's without a doubt one of the most popular Tellius characters, and I often hear that people like using her in both games, and according to their experience, she was a great unit. Which is awkward to say the least, as empirically she's anything but great, and depending on what side of the fence you're on, could be viewed as extremely overrated, and well, they're not exactly wrong.
Wait just a minute. Didn't you call her the best unit in Radiant Dawn previously?
I don't want to talk about it. Well, at the very least, Nephene's hero manifestation is more in line with her prevalent status, kind of, as she's a reasonably potent unit that, while not outstanding, has what it takes to bring the pain, and is a very strong standalone hero to boot. See, this is why you're the only one worthy of the Wishblade.
Thank you!
This fierce halberdier's contributions to Ike and his army varies between the two games, but overall Nephene is objectively pretty meh. In Path of Radiance, Nephene is a bad unit, but not downright dreadful despite some claims to the contrary. I mean, come on people, Soph is a dreadful unit, Nephene ain't that bad. For what it's worth, her availability and growths are decent, and because Path of Radiance is in my opinion a rather easy game, it's not uncommon for her to perform well with a bit of investment. But that doesn't change the fact that she starts with terrible weapon ranks, not very good bases, is lance-locked and is a foot unit in a game dominated by mounted classes. Plus her competition comes in the form of Oscar, Titania and Marcia, three of the best units in the game, making it really difficult to vouch for her. Moving forward 3 years, Nephene has advanced into a much better unit, but only to the point of being, I'd say, objectively decent. This time around, Nephene has better bases, but still not the best, high availability, which is a big factor in Radiant Dawn, is statistically the best halberdier in the game, benefits greatly from transfer bonuses more so than the majority of units, and she has high growths in skill, speed, and resistance. But poor growth in everything else, is lance-locked in the game where axes really dominate, gets weighed down by her starting weapon, and has both strength and defense issues. So while she isn't good per se, she still has her uses, and you could do worse in Radiant Dawn. So much worse! With the help of heroes, Nephene has finally become a good unit, and this is primarily due to her stat distribution, encompassing good speed, defense, decent attack and HP, allowing her to be a highly capable unit both offensively and defensively, made better by the fact that Nephene is someone I would deliberate to be significantly self-sufficient, and doesn't require buffs or supports just to be effective unlike other units, though every little helps. Her base kit I also find to be excellent, starting out with a Slaying Lance Plus and New Moon at 5-star, with skills that are cheap and easy to obtain. Of course Nephene has problems, as her attack is only decent, which means that she'll be relying on special attacks to take down her foes, though thankfully her weapon and skills like Wrath somewhat mitigate the issue. However, the same cannot be said for a rather poor resistance, and combined with only passable HP, makes magic units the bane of her existence, which coming off Radiant Dawn just feels wrong. Setbacks notwithstanding, Nephene is a respectable unit that can work in just about any situation, and to this day, no matter what game she's in, she has yet to disappoint me. Noe. From the information I've been able to ascertain, dragon-based units seem to be one of the overall best classes in Heroes. I mean, sure, they have their downsides, but I consider the majority of these unit types to be substantially powerful, and I noticed that many of them are very high up in the rankings too. On that note, Noe is someone I cited to be one of the best dragons in the game, and also one of the cutest, even though some prefer the term pedophile bait. Don't act surprised, we've all seen those comments. Even though Noe was adorable since Awakening, the same cannot be said for a top tier standing, as while originally I don't think she was bad per se, at the same time, I don't feel good as a quantitatively accurate description either. It makes me wonder why I keep making you a part of my team. Oh, that explains it. Monarchies in Fire Emblem have a reputation of being units the player obtains rather late, but absolutely destroy whoever they go up against. Noe, however, was the complete opposite, as she enters Awakening rather early on, but can't kill reliably as she's so goddamn slow and has poor bases on the whole. I mean, to her credit, she's rather bulky, but at that point most units would be more robust, and even though she does have high growth rates, so do the majority of Awakening's casts, and as such, I don't see her as too remarkable. I'm starting to wonder whether or not dragons really do make everything better. The answer to that question is yes, for Heroes Noe has an excellent stat spread with solid numbers all around, and possessing rather good attack and HP, giving her tremendous coverage against the enemy team. Her main form of offense, Lightning Breath, plays a big part in this. As low base attack notwithstanding, it can counterattack at any range, and if the player is able to weapon refine it, targets the foe's defense or resistance stat, allowing Noe to deal even more damage than usual, along with all the benefits of being a dragon, so I find that she doesn't have any major downsides. But that doesn't mean she's invulnerable. After all, she's susceptible to anti-dragon weapons, lacks the mobility of other classes, as well as other infantry weaknesses for what it's worth. Thankfully, I view these as merely minor setbacks, and it doesn't stop Noe from kicking ass each and every time she decides to let loose. Who'd have thought something so cute could be so dangerous?
Appearances can be deceiving.
Mia. I find it disheartening that the more I play Fire Emblem, the more I realise just how lackluster Myrmidons and Swordmasters tend to be in the grand scheme of things. I mean, don't get me wrong, there are some great ones out there like Ryoma, Stefan and Kritka, but a sizable amount of them are impartially mediocre or just plain bad. And sadly, Mia is no exception. Or at least she was, until heroes came to her rescue, transforming her into, from what I can tell, one of the best sword users in the game despite some very steep competition, and is surprisingly versatile to boot. I would be more shocked, but when your training partner is Ike, his greatness is bound to rub off on you. Mia, from my point of view, is very similar to Nephany, where her performance varies greatly between both games. However, now I find it to be under more extreme circumstances, since in Path of Radiance, Mia is objectively an unquestionably bad unit, but again, not the worst in the game. Mia's biggest problem outside of the mare base is unexceptional growths, being sword and foot locked, and having advantages or only saving grace, is that our competition is extremely heavy. Ike is available from the start and has a better stat and growth spread. Xerath comes in a bit later but has adept along with overall better numbers. And then there's Stefan, who joins as a pre-promote with a personal weapon and base stats that are as beautiful as Camilla's tits.
Oh my.
So yeah, Mia sucks in Path of Radiance, but luckily Radiant Dawn was kinder to her, as she's a girl mercenary unit, so that means high availability. Being sword locked is no longer a problem. She has decent bases and good growth rates, some strong skills, and is an overall solid unit. But for me, she isn't Xerath, so bench. Fire Emblem Heroes is where Mia finally gets to fight on the front lines and show off her swordplay, as she maintains the best speed stat in the game at a whopping 40. So unless the enemy has a brave weapon or super buffs, this little lady is never getting doubled, and will instead double her foes more times than EA makes life worse for all of us. Her super speed is made all the better by her weapon, the Resolute Blade, with 16 base power, attack +3 and +10 damage with special triggers. And despite all this power at her disposal, I actually feel Mia has a decent amount of bulk too, which can make killing her in a single attack a challenge in of itself. Mia doesn't get off scot-free however, as she tends to struggle against foes with very high defense and ranged options, for she cannot counterattack and often relies on her specials to break through them, so using Mia can be a bit of a gamble at times, though personally it's a risk I'm willing to take, as after years of being a unit that went completely under my radar, Mia has finally got her time in the spotlight and demonstrates just how far she's come. I think you and I could do for a rematch. Sanaki. Before the Empress of Benyon gained the unfortunate reputation of "Oh, intelligent systems, why would you do this?" from the fan base, she was formerly known as that unit in Radiant Dawn no one wanted to bring to the endgame but had to because the game said so. Or am I getting her mixed up with Soph? Either way, both of us stay there welcome. Well, at least now I'll gladly take Sanaki out into the field of battle, because holy hell does she bring new meaning to the phrase "burn the house down," as her damage output is straight up terrifying and capable of reducing the enemy to nothing but cinders, so it's great to know that I can embrace this once unwanted unit with open arms. Or am I thinking of Soph again? This cannot be a coincidence. As the Empress of Benyon, Sanaki does have quite a few strengths to her name, as her attack stat is downright nuts and she has wonderful weapon ranks too, not to mention a great personal term and growth rates to boot, making Sanaki a magical nuke. Or she would be if her HP, strength, defense and speed stat weren't a joke, making it nearly impossible for her to double enemies and by extension kill anyone, and I mean anyone. Not to mention she gets doubled more times than I'm comfortable with, and the game forces her into your party from part 4 until the very end. Yet I don't feel she brings much to the table and takes up a valuable spot that many other units would put to much better use. Now you sit in that corner and think about what you've done.
열받네.
Not too much has changed about Sanaki in recent times, however now her build can actually work in tandem with the game's mechanics for the most part. Sanaki's damage output has remained monstrous at an enormous 37 base attack, which is the third highest in the game, allowing Sanaki to one-shot an extensive number of enemies. Power isn't everything though, as Sanaki also has very good resistance to tank all manner of magical assaults, even more so with Triangle Adept, and she is capable of granting some very useful buffs, with Cymbeline increasing adjacent allies' attack by 4, and Hone Attack granting them an additional 4 points to their damage. Since Sanaki can work for attack, magical defense and support simultaneously, I found her to be a very versatile unit that can benefit just about any team comp. But she also has the downside of heavily relying on her team to be sufficiently effective, since most of her skills only work on allies and she doesn't even have a special attack.
You have got to be kidding!
The Sovereign of Benyon may hit hard and can tank magic, but since her HP, defense and speed are disappointing to say the least, just about any physical fighter can put her in her place. Sanaki may require constant support and protection, which I'll admit can be a bit of a hassle to work around, but I sustain the opinion that she's more than worth the effort to take care of, as her presence will be a blessing to whomever fights alongside her, instead of making life miserable for everyone. Took you long enough to figure that out. Dorcas. Yeah, what happened to Dorcas? Poisonous mutton, we've heard the meme a million times, ha ha bloody ha! Despite Dorcas' meme-tastic status being what most people associate the Mutton Man with, I figured his role within Heroes to be equally noteworthy. After all, he went from possibly one of the most units in a game filled with units, into such a bulky badass I would not dare challenge head on, as opposed to a unit I wouldn't dare send into battle to begin with. Times have most certainly changed. Fire Emblem Blazing Sword is a game filled with many underwhelming units, and unfortunately Dorcas is one of them. Now for what it's worth, Dorcas does possess pretty decent bases, with a speed stat that actually lets him double units, good HP and strength growth making him rather bulky. But aside from that, everything else falls flat and almost every other axe user in the game outshines him. Except Barter. That dude is shitter than shit. So while I figure him to be somewhat useful early on, he'll quickly get replaced and become yet another bench warmer. Heroes, it seems, decided that Dorcas needed to flex his muscles, and holy shit did he flex them something fierce. Stat-wise, Dorcas is an extremely bulky unit. Great HP, high attack and good defense allows him to fare well against an enormous amount of physical units, and he even fares well against ranged foes thanks to his stout tomahawk, which can counter-attack at any distance. Dorcas furthermore brings with him some moderately potent skills that I find benefit both him and his teammates in the form of fierce stance, quick riposte, and infantry pulse, giving Dorcas more to do than just use his brute strength. Too bad he's diminutive in other areas, prominently due to his atrocious speed stat of only 23, and while not awful, low res of 24. Dorcas regrettably gets doubled by the majority of units, and don't get me started upon how magic users can seriously fuck him up provided they don't get killed upon counterattack. But with that said, it's good to see that Dorcas has evolved from such a mediocre man into an outright beast. Guess they put something good in his mutton this time. Gwendolyn. I'm sure we've all got that one unit we just so happen to love despite how awful they are objectively, and if you know me, I have many, but by far the most infamous of the bunch is Gwendolyn.
Then why did you call her underrated?
I don't want to talk about it! Well, at the very least, thanks to Heroes, I can take pride in the fact that I love Gwendolyn, because man did she get one heck of a buff in a way that has her situation correspond with Lind, by managing to remain a powerful piston since the game first launched. Now I will be the first to admit quite a few of the Heroes versions of units on this list I'd say are better than Gwendolyn, but considering just how awful she was originally, her renovation from shit to superb is something I simply cannot overlook. I swear if they ever remake Binding Blade, I will main the fuck out of you. Gwendolyn is not only one of the worst units in Binding Blade, but Fire Emblem as a whole. Detestable bases, a horrific class for the game in question, is Lancelot before promotion in the game filled to the brim with axe units, is outclassed by all the other knights in the game which suck too minus Douglas, has at the very least good growth rates but they're nothing spectacular, she joins a little late into the game, dies at the first enemy she encounters on hard mode, and by all logical reasoning and impartial evidence is an absolutely god-awful unit who should never be used under any circumstances. And yet for me, she managed to get the highest kill count and take down Sophia.
Don't mess with me.
Based on her hero's performance, it seems that all that power remained with her upon being summoned into Asker, as Gwendolyn has the 14th highest base stat total in the game, outclassing both Hector and Sophia and having the same accumulative value as the Black Knight. I'm dead serious. Gwendolyn's numbers are also very well rounded. Great HP, very high defense, and pretty good res too, permitting her to do battle with a wide variety of enemies. I find that her skills aren't too shabby either, with Hone Armor, Drag Bag, and a Killer Lance, plus Escutcheon helps to increase her bulk, and overall Gwendolyn is a very efficient tank. However, this comes at a cost, as she has all the downsides of being a knight like anti-armor weapons and one move, not to mention her base attack isn't great, so she might have trouble getting kills, and can only sustain so much damage. Clearly this Knight of Ostia is not as impressive as some of the other entities present within this countdown, but I'm adamant that Gwendolyn's improvement from her initial debut is correspondingly substantial, and has been able to uphold her position within the army from day one, and thus I promise to believe in her until the very end, for she is the one true Queen of Burn. Arden. Oh man, this guy. If you thought Gwendolyn was a terrible armor unit, she still is, and is in fact the lesser of the two. But that being said, Arden was legendary in just how useless of a role he played in FE4 that the game itself even made fun of him for it. Well, look who's laughing now! For Arden has reformed into an absolute monster and a positively ridiculous physical unit, living up to his reputation as a literal wall, and in my opinion is now one of the best knights out there. And when taking into account just how many fantastic armor units this game is home to, I can't stress enough the magnitude of his renovation. Here's hoping he's at least half as good in the Genealogy remake. Those of you who have played Fire Emblem 4 knows how comprehensively the game leads towards mounted units while leaving on-foot soldiers in the dust. This spells bad news for Arden as he has the lowest movement in the game and will always be 5 miles behind the rest of your team. That alone is bad enough, but Arden also has the unfortunate side effect of not being able to double without the pursuit ring and struggling to deal a hefty amount of damage regardless. Now, I will give Arden credit that he is very hefty and can tank a lot of hits, which makes him useful in a small number of situations, but it doesn't change the fact that he's a dreadful unit the game goes out of its way to make life difficult for. Then again, Fire Emblem 4 makes life difficult for me, it's so boring. Well, now that Arden is featured in a game where maps aren't the size of the Grand Canyon, he can actually do something worthwhile. Stat-wise, Arden I can confidently claim to be the best physical tank there is. 60 HP and 41 defense means even lance units are going to have a hard time getting past him, so he can make for a wonderful wall to soak up the damage and conversely dish it back out due to that gargantuan 36 base attack. Already this is delightful, but what I feel makes the situation better is how his skill set is designed to make up for his weaknesses. Brave Sword gives him an automatic double attack which can then be boosted to quadruple with the follow-up ring, Dive Defense gives his allies increased bulk, while Pervise will cut the enemy's damage in half. Simply put, if you face Arden in a melee battle, you will lose. I must lament that Arden's biggest weakness takes the form of magic uses, as both his resistance and speed are a joke, allowing mages to rip him to shreds, and God help him if Reinhardt or Olwen happen to be present.
This is bad!
Arden is also a difficult unit to build due to him being Tempest Trials only and requiring a hefty amount of investment to fully optimize, though base Arden is fine as is, and it's amazing to see how far the Nightcast has come since the early days of Fire Emblem. And on that note... Emelia. Much like the famously fierce Halberdier, it wasn't uncommon for a select number of players to praise Emelia as one of the greatest units in Sacred Stones and claim that she was capable of solo in the game. That is until you realise A, soloing Sacred Stones is not much of an accomplishment bearing in mind how easy the game is, and B, when one strips away all the bells and whistles like grinding and such, Emelia amounts to a big pile of bleh. Or that was the case until Heroes came along to set right all the wrongs, thanks to her now incredible versatility and significant contributions to an armor-focused team. Emelia, you do the people of Grado proud. Since her starting class as a trainee, it's easy to assume that she'd be rather weak initially but have high growth rates to compensate, right? Well, she does have bad starting stats that will get her killed the moment she steps out onto the battlefield. And what's worse is she actually has bad growth rates too, meaning it will take longer than necessary before she can start pulling her own weight. And before you start crying, but you can grind in the tower! Those kind of factors do not apply to objective performance, as grinding can literally make everybody good. On top of those already huge negatives, she is heavily outclassed by at least 6 other mounted units, and though her availability isn't the worst, it's not exactly great either. When setting forth into the Asker Kingdom, I detected that Emelia's situation was similar to that of Gwendolyn, where her bases went from why are you even here to fuck me Freddy sideways, as Emelia currently sustains the 8th highest base stat total in the game, even greater than the likes of the Black Knight, Arden, and on par with Valentine's Hector.
Sometimes I surprise myself.
Her build is equally excellent, as not counting resistance, all of her stats are above 30, and for an Armor Knight, her speed stat is simply inspiring at 34, so versatility is no issue on her part. Emelia also has some skills that I feel greatly benefit an armor comp, with Armor March granting her adjacent Knight allies +1 movement, Earth Boost giving her increased defense during combat provided she has enough HP, plus Slaying Axe is nice too. Honestly, I don't find there to be much that's bad about Emelia aside from low resistance, but even then Sacred Cow can help protect her to an extent, and the fact that she's gone from one of the worst units in the series to one of Heroes' finest fighters speaks fathoms about how much of an enhancement she's been blessed with. In fact, it's difficult for me to picture anyone else making such momentous progress. Or it would be, if it wasn't for... Ira. This woman and I have a rather interesting relationship. When I first played Genealogy, I thought Ira was a great unit. Don't worry, I'm about to address that, so keep it out of the comment section. When I took a deeper look with an objective mindset, I realised she wasn't all that, and upon playing Genealogy again from the start, she once again turned out amazing. It's a recurring thing at this point. I will not deny just how factually lackluster Ira is, or should I say, was. Holy mother of Miller on a Naga sandwich has Ira hit the big time. Going from one of the worst Gen 1 units in FE4 to possibly the best sword unit in Heroes and an all-around incredible, reliable, versatile swordmaster almost no one else compares to, you, my lady, have aged like the finest of wines. Ira, from what I've been able to ascertain, is essentially a luck-based unit, and by extension, not a good one. Right off the bat, her two biggest problems is the fact that she's sword and foot locked in a game like Genealogy, which pretty much means an automatic fail. But what makes things worse is that she's judiciously frail and doesn't even have very high avoid, so I find it rather unwise to send her into a horde thinking she'll dodge every enemy because that's unlikely to happen, though it's not impossible. To add insult to injury, her bases and growths are neither here nor there, a sizable number of units outshine her, and unless she activates Astra, which is luck based mind you, she'll rarely be killing anyone in a single round, though if my experience is anything to go off, she had the devil's own luck. Luck, however, is beneath Ira these days. For her hero's representation, I would summarize as downright disgusting, and literal nightmare fuel for any foe stupid enough to face her head on.
No problem!
Please.
Ira may not have the highest base stat total, but she's got it where it counts, with 37 base speed, 41 HP, 33 attack, and an astonishing 31 defense considering her class. Ira is not only rather well rounded, but her offensive capabilities might be the greatest in the entire game. Naturally, her speed and attack are an extensive advantage. However, her skill set is practically designed to decimate her foes before they know what's what, as her personal weapon has 16 base attack, grants speed +3 and special cooldown charge +1 if her speed is higher than the enemy's. Swift Sparrow gives her increased attack and speed, Desperation won't allow her opponents a chance to fight back because they'll be dead in an instant, and Regnal Astra boosts her damage by 40% of her speed. So with a base speed of 37, 40% of which is 14.8, if rounded up is an extra 15 damage. And when taking into account IVs, skill boosts from herself and other units, merging, support bonuses and so on, that extra damage can go from 15 to... Believe it or not, Ira isn't perfect as she has a rather meager resistance stat, which means she's rather susceptible to magical foes, so the likes of Reinhardt spell bad news. But aside from that, I honestly think that Ira doesn't have any major downsides and is one of the most spectacular duelists in the entire game, ensuring that everyone who clashes blades with her will not live to tell the tale. And it's for this reason that, to me, Ira is the #1 unit that got better in Fire Emblem Heroes. Sure, other units are worse in their base games, and Ira doesn't have the highest base stat total out there, but her sheer destructive vigor is enough to send shivers down the spines of every entity in the Fire Emblem universe, as her journey from a luck-based and unreliable fighter into a woman who will cut down all adversaries before they can so much as blink is, simply put, the stuff of legend, which is why she takes the #1 spot as the unit who I found to be infinitely better in Fire Emblem Heroes. This has been Blazing Knight. I wish you all a great night, take care, and I have found Fire Emblem Heroes to be a wonderful celebration of the franchise and its history, allowing players to collect and control their favourite unit and bask in these previously substandard soldiers redeeming themselves in a brand new world. It's just a shame that not everyone was able to bring their A-game. Hey there everyone, thank you for watching today and I hope you really enjoyed the video. Please let me know what you thought in the comments and what units in Fire Emblem do you think have got significantly better in Heroes. Feel free to let me know and any important factors I may have missed out. Of course, I want to say a big thank you to my buddy Zane for helping out with this video and pointing out my past failures.
You owe me some money for this.
I absolutely love you. Also, please be sure to check out his channel as he has a wonderful Fire Emblem Lost support series. Also, please be sure to like, subscribe and stay notified, follow me on Twitter, Amino, and if you'd like to go the extra mile, Patreon as well. Speaking of which, I'd like to take this time to say a huge thank you to all of my patrons who helped support the channel. None of these videos could be possible without any of you, so thank you so much. And shoutouts go to Chaos Sabereye, Justin Konovich, Samuel Line, Nate Perkins, Vanessa Westfall, Patanko Fan 32, Tivis James Little 4, Almont, Vincent Clark, Jeremy Redinger, Midnight Castle, Maggie Fall, The Main Idea, Perfect Oblivion, and finally Ferrolin8 392. Thank you all so much, you guys are the absolute best. Anyway, that's it from me. I'll see you all next time.